Okay, so we're going to be talking about a very violent murderer, and his name is Matthew Cushing. Does that sound familiar at all
Not
to
at
you?
all.
Well, you're about to learn way too much about him. Okay. You may have heard about him just because I did actually go to Maine and interview him in prison. And so when I tell you the story, it might sound familiar, but there's really like very, very little about him on the internet, which is surprising because it's a crazy, crazy story. And I interviewed him for the show Mind of a Murderer for IID. And it was like, it's an interesting one to watch. Even now I like watching it. Sorry. Even now I like watching that episode because he's this baby-faced young guy. He looks like a frat boy. So it was February 2008, and Matthew is a college junior, and he woke up that morning with an irrepressible urge to kill his stepfather, Christopher Bolduc. I do want to say here that this is a man he loved very much.
He never had the urge before?
Well, we'll get to that.
Okay.
According to Matthew, he suspected that Chris, his stepdad, was going to leave his mom, which in doing that, he would leave his half-brother Josh and himself. And he just didn't want to let him do that. So he saw no other solution than to get up and kill him. So he gets out of bed, he gets in his car, and he drives to, Old Orchard. It's the cutest place. Old Orchard Beach, Maine, from his apartment at the University of Maine. He arrives in the early afternoon, and when he gets there, his brother Josh opens the door. So he tells Josh, Dad's going to leave Mom. And he's like, whatever. I don't know that he's going to leave Mom. He's like, no, he's going to leave Mom. Our parents are going to get divorced, and I'm going to kill him. And he's like,
He told his brother?
Yeah, he told his little brother, who he's really close to, I'm going to kill Dad. And he's like, you're not going to kill Dad. And he said, yes. He was upset. He was emotional. And he said Josh needed to be on board with the killing. Well, obviously Josh refused. And before Matthew knew it, he was attacking Josh and stabbing him, his little brother, who he loved, in a blind rage. Then realizing what he'd done, he takes a towel and he puts it over his face because he said he didn't want to remember him that way. Sitting beside his body, he said he didn't know how it happened and that he felt empty inside. I asked him that. I'm like, how'd you feel? He's like, nothing. So Carol, the mom, she thought she saw Matthew's car downtown, and he's supposed to be in college, he's supposed to be on campus. So she calls first her husband and was like, have you heard anything from Matthew? Is he supposed to be in town? He's like, no, I didn't know anything. So then she leaves work and goes to the house. She's heading home. She has no idea what she's about to walk into. It's a trap. So Matthew sees his mom and has the impression that she instantly knew something was wrong, even though Josh was in another room. Josh's body's in another room. So Matthew grabbed her, sat on top of her with his hands around her throat, and then he ends up stabbing his mother in the throat.
Oh, my God.
And at that point, he didn't know if she was alive or not. But then he tells me he soon noticed her face was the wrong color. So killing his mother seemed to make logical sense to Matthew because he said he couldn't have her knowing that he had just killed her brother, and he really felt like he just couldn't have her suffer with the fact that her kid is dead and her other child killed him. I'm like, okay, I was really having a hard time with this.
Yeah.
So he tells me he starts thinking that it's really his stepdad who's responsible for the murders he had just committed, which of course is convenient for him because he came there to kill his stepdad and he had to kill them instead.
Is the stepdad home?
Not yet.
Okay.
His stepdad, Chris, had become concerned enough to come home when Carol stopped answering her phone. So Chris, the stepdad, walks in. Matthew lunges at him with a knife, and he started screaming. The stepdad started screaming. And Matthew says at that point, if I didn't kill him, I was scared he was going to kill me. So he used a stun gun on him that he had bought weeks earlier, which really signifies premeditation.
Yeah. He said he woke up with the urge.
Bingo. So we're going to get to that. He uses that to overpower his stepfather, and then he does end up killing him. He stuns him and stabs him, and he kills him. And then to add insult to injury, he kills his dog. He kills the family dog that he loved.
For no reason.
I mean, I don't know. It drives me nuts. According to Matthew, he had decided he didn't want people to see the bodies of his family this way, so he had to burn down the house. Firefighters were the first on the scene. They discovered the bodies. And when asked I asked him, I'm like, really? You did that so other people wouldn't suffer, or could you have possibly been doing that to cover your ass and remove evidence? And he's like, no. My hands were so damaged and bloodied from the fighting to kill them that I knew I was nailed. So he drives back to his campus, back to his apartment after he starts the fire. And then obviously he's the only family member who's not in the house with all the dead people. So investigators suspect him right away. And they come to the door. Police officer knocks on the door. He's standing in his pajamas. And the officer says, why are your hands bloody?
He's in his pajamas?
He's in his pajamas. So he goes home and goes to bed.
Oh.
Yeah, he goes home and goes to, like, he's at his house. It's late. By this time, I think it's later. He's definitely, or he told me he was in his pajamas, or I heard from an investigator that he was in his pajamas. Or maybe it was sweats. He got comfy, let's just say. He went home. He was like, well, that's done. And he tells the officer that he cut his hands cooking, which clearly is not what happened. When the officer was questioning him, he said he thought about killing him right then and there. And I don't know if I say this.
He
later.
thought about killing the officer? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and he's like, well, listen, I probably say this later about what he said about killing the officer. He said, I just killed everybody I loved. I don't care about this guy. I don't care if he has a family. I don't care anything about him. And I thought about killing him. But then I'm like, A, I don't know if I can. He said to me, I don't know if I'll be able to do it. And B, what next? I'm obviously the person.
Yeah, no, I think you were asking him, like, what if he was nervous, basically, like that he was being questioned, and he's basically just like, I just wanted to kill him.
Yeah, I think I didn't even ask him if he wanted to kill him.
Yeah.
He's like, by the way, I really wanted to kill that guy.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
that was what was going through his head, when normally you'd be like, oh no, I'm cornered, I'm being questioned.
Yeah, so this isn't because the stepdad was going to do something. This is just he has these urges.
yes. It's like she knows, but you don't even know. Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of the crux of it. So he offered that up to me. And at one point I said, does it ever occur to you that your life is not more important than everyone else's? And he's like, yeah, no, not so much. So they search the apartment. They find a bloody knife and a stun gun in a bloody backpack.
Does he live alone?
No, he lives with 10 people.
Oh my gosh.
Or he's one of 10. I know.
I'm picturing my own college situation.
Yeah.
Having run
like-
out and like killed my family and come back.
Come back, you're like, hi, Emily. Like,
Yeah.
I know I could say Emily because you have so many friends named Emily that one of them must have lived with you. Matthew naturally confessed to the crime. He said he felt numb and empty inside when I asked him how it felt. He pleaded guilty to 3 counts of murder and 1 count of arson and was sentenced to life in prison. I'm not going to lie, I'm a little irritated that animal cruelty wasn't thrown in there. I realize that it's not important when you've killed your entire fucking family, but I just feel like there's something psychologically different when you also are like, you too, you're gonna
Yeah, like
die.
the dog didn't do anything to you.
Yeah, well, neither did.
Didn't they just make it a felony, I think, to animal cruelty?
I don't know.
I feel like that, I'll look it up. I feel like that just happened.
Let's donate to that cause.
Yeah.
Okay, so as I mentioned before, I've definitely have my own theories about this, but I have to tell you about my meeting with him because it's nuts. So I walk into I'm driving to this prison, and I literally...
Is the prison in Maine also?
Yes. Okay, so the night before, my kids were really little. So it was one of those times where I couldn't get there the day before and prep. It was like I had to nurse and pass off a kid and then go, kind of a situation. So I arrived, and from where I was living, Maine was already 3 hours ahead. I took the last flight out. So I arrived really late, and I have to drive all the way to the prison, which is not near a town. Prisons rarely are, unless you're at the beautiful prison in Marin County, which I'm like, why does San Quentin have the best real estate in all of California? If you're going to go to prison, that's the one you want, kids. So I arrived super late. It was this really scary drive. There was snow on the ground. It was 2 a.m. And I knew this interview was going to be tougher because typically I go in with a head start. I've done a bunch of research. I come up with my own wackadoodle theories as a neurocriminologist. Sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong. I recognize it when I'm wrong. But usually I have an idea. I'm like, oh, this is an impulsive killer, or it's a psychopathic killer, or it's whatever type of killer. But I was like, I have no idea what happened, and no one else does either. Everyone I read about was like, they're coming up with all these crazy theories, but nothing seemed to really hold water. Nothing made sense to me as somebody who's supposed to understand something about it. I was like, I don't know. Should we even interview this guy? Because I really have no clue. so he had never granted an interview before. And there'd only been speculation about his motive. So I feel this pressure. So we wake up, we've had no sleep. So it's Andrea, who's my producer, Jared, who's our camera and sound guy, and then we have another field producer, but only Jared and Andrea can go into the prison with me because that's the limit. So we're at the prison and we're being escorted through, but Jared gets stuck at clearance because he has to get all the cameras, all the sound gear, the booms, everything through the metal detector, and something's not working. So they suggest the guard takes Andrea and I by ourselves. We grab the gear we can, and we start walking through the prison, which is weird in and of itself because there's just prisoners cruising around with you. And
wow.
Yeah, and you get used to that.
You do?
Well, I think eventually you would. I don't know if I did.
I guess you kind of have to sort of.
Oh, I think I have to be like serious and Dr. Word face, but
Right.
really I'm just like, and it's not, I mean, you hear about it. Prisoners do take hostages. It has happened. It's
Yeah.
not even
Yeah.
uncommon. In fact, the Dannemora prison in New York, I interviewed somebody 2 weeks before there was that major escape. But just before I interviewed there, they had held a prisoner held a reporter or as a hostage for hours using a pen against her neck. The pen she asked him to sign his release with. I know, things I wish I'd known before I went into prisons. I'm always like, here's your pen. So anyway, we're being escorted, and the guard recognizes that Jared is now caught up with us. When you walk through prison corridors, as you've seen on TV, like this door behind you closes.
Yeah.
You have to get to the next door, then it opens, and then
Okay.
it closes behind you. And that next door doesn't open until you get there, for the reasons we could all imagine. So he go through this door. Interview room is down the corridor there. The corridor only goes to the left. And he goes back and gets Jared. The doors open, they shut behind us, and there's a guy in plain clothes, and he's like, oh, let me help you. So Andrea gives him the camera. Andrea and I start walking toward the door, and I'm like,
Is it him?
I had seen a picture of him. The hair on the back of my neck raises. I'm like, he's now standing behind.
So he's in plain clothes?
Plain
Oh, for
clothes.
the interview, but not normally?
But I've never interviewed somebody in plain clothes.
Right.
So I'm like, oh my God, he's standing behind us with a weapon. He has a giant camera now. So I turn around and I'm like, Matthew Cushing, Michelle Ward. And I stick out my hand, shake his hand. With my other hand, I grab the camera. And Andrea, like, slowly, and she's teeny tiny, she slowly turns around and she's like, oh. I'm like, Matthew, would you guide us to the interview room? And I made him walk in front of us. It was so scary. But, I mean, he also looked like, you know, a college
boy.
kid, but I
Yeah.
know what he did.
Yeah.
So it was pretty scary.